Cleo, I'm so glad that you're here. It's so fun to meet you. You're so beautiful. I feel like everything you put out is beautiful. Over the years, I've like screenshotted and shared your posts. Um, it's just a lot of beauty. The words are beautiful. The meaning is beautiful. You are gorgeous. I just feel like that's what I would say is you're just a lot of
Oh
beauty in
my
one place.
God. Thank you so much. I'm very thankful for the screen grab aspect of phones because I've actually made a lot of friends through the words them saying, I screen grabbed a lot of things you wrote. And I'm like, that's cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I love what you write. I love how you write it. And my listeners will probably, once they, take a look, they'll be like, oh, I've shared her stuff so many times. Um, so you have been writing and you've been like waxing poetry for all of us. And now there's a new book that's coming out. And I guess before we even dive into that, I would love to have some context. I think most people, we just get caught up sometimes in our subconscious mind. And a lot of the time, there's a lot of Velcro there for negative thoughts. And so you are coming from this beautiful, clean place where your heart is so open and you are able to perceive so much beauty and resonance and connection with yourself, with the world, with your soul, with other people's souls. How did you even get to that place? Like where were you and what was the unlock for you in your life that allowed you to swim in something that was so higher vibrationally, matched? How did you get to that place?
Well, there's, I think there's how I got to the place, maybe slightly in general, and then how I got to the place for this book specifically. So I actually wrote a little bit about this in Remember Love, which is I'd I'd never actually been able to pinpoint. I didn't have that aha moment per se, or I didn't think I did until recently. I was talking to Cheryl Strayed, and she had defined vulnerability. And, vulnerability is one of those words like self love or self care, or, where it becomes kind of this really highly marketed idea. And then we are like, wait, what does that mean? I think with vulnerability, or, I think we're even intimacy, there's these words where a lot of different people say them and they mean a lot of different things to different people. And I think that it's a really hard to find yourself in something that is defined in many ways. And she said to me, vulnerability is being honest about who you are and what you're going through. And I think in my very early 20s, I read my first kind of self-help book because I wasn't raised in a house that was, I was raised in a house that was spiritual in the sense of there was soulful music and a really soulful experience of growing up in New Orleans. And my mom is a cook and my dad is a very, very funky artist. And so I think and New Orleans is really the kind of personality of New Orleans is really the center of my parents' being. They are not people who focus on hustle and grind or working. They're people who focus on Mardi Gras and dancing and being in food and being out with their friends. The kind of culture of, I'd say maybe what just brings us joy outside of a kind of purposeful workspace is really the center of who they are. And so, but also in that you don't find a ton of tools, right? Because the tools are usually go out and have a good time. And so when you deal with things that, whether it's anxiety or depression or these things that are like, well, I want to go out and have a good time, but something inside of me is saying well, that's
Right.
really hard to do, or it's not resonating, or I don't feel it. Um, and I went on this kind of tear of self-help books when I was in my early 20s, and I I'd always kind of written in a kind of private way. And I'd always kind of written these notes to my friends when they were going through something. Even this morning, I wrote one to a friend who um, called me about something that was she was going through, but I could listen on the phone and I could hear and I could talk to them about it. but something really came alive for how I felt that I could be there for them by writing it down. So I remember even one of my more well-known kind of poems is something that says, baby, you're the strongest flower that ever grew. Remember that when the weather changes. And I'd actually written that in a notebook when a friend had called me about a breakup. And after we were on the phone talking about it, I wrote that down and I sent her a photo and I said, I think just remember these words and you'll get through this. And I think over the years, I started to wonder if, if kind of following that old idea of if you do the thing you love, you'll feel like you never go to work, which also can translate as if you do the thing that feels like it flows really naturally to you, perhaps you're living in your gift. And so I think for me, I wondered about that, and I kind of allowed myself to take risks and chances around that. So I started in a more of a public art space, and I would write. I'd collaborate with different artists to put these poems on the sides of walls and billboards, and then I eventually brought them to Instagram, which I felt I was kind of late in that space, but and I really saw it resonate more and more with people. And so I think for me, the unlock was, can I take what kind of flows within me with ease and not try to make it difficult, but instead share it. And I think when I talked to Cheryl and she had said the thing about vulnerability, I think I also something was going on with me at the time, maybe, which is why I was turning to those books in the sense of, I think I was wondering if there was something more. But I think what I realized is that I think I was ready to kind of be in the world without a mask, even of like the childhood mask or the mask you put on so that your parents are okay with you or that your peers are okay with you or that you're accepted. I'd moved to New York City and I wanted to, as I guess Maya Angelou said, invent myself. And I'd done a really scary thing by moving to a big city alone. And I think I wanted to be, as Cheryl said, honest about who I was and what I was going through. And I think I felt like if I was telling the truth, I knew I was on the right track. And so I've, for the past 10 years, just focused on telling the truth about who I am and what I'm going through.
It's all so beautiful. I love the path and I love the awakening and I love just being in that consciousness so that everybody who's listening just remembers to remember that this is a choice, that you can live your life being who you are in front of camera, so to speak, and the same as you are behind stage, sort of like not wearing a mask, not living with a persona, but really just being authentic and also just being in the inquiry of what does it really mean to invent and to live a life that is most aligned with you. I love that whole journey. You also said something beautiful, which is like, maybe you're just living in your gift. Do you think that everybody has a gift? Do you think that that's a possible flow for everybody to feel like they're waking up, living in their gift?
I do. And I think that we have to allow the gifts to be every shape and size. And again, I feel I am the story of someone who didn't have the big aha moment or even the big, really horrible rock bottom moment that made me look up and ask, God to help me. But I have had a collection of very tough and hard things I've gone through. And I think that in finding our gifts, just like in affirming our own journeys or our own worthiness, is whatever you've gone through, whether it's a 6 to you or a 10 to you, don't bribe yourself out of being worthy of your experience and your experience being worthy of you. And so I think that the gifts are the same. I think that whether your gift, I think if you're constantly looking for your gift to be a painting or a song or the piano, I think you may feel, what is my gift? But I think if your gift can be your listening or your warmth or your ability to learn something really quickly and synthesize it and teach it to others, I think that you can bring those gifts to anything you do. And that does turn what you do into your gift. And so I think that you really, I think so much of the time we get roadblocked because we are so sure the path is supposed to look one way. And when we release that kind of tense and strict energy about how we get to the top, we actually enjoy getting to the top of that mountain. And it actually feels very life affirming. And we don't even care once we get to the top.
It's so true, because you're enjoying the satisfaction moment by moment of showing up for what's there. And therefore, people say to me, like, how were you patient? How can you be patient on your way to making your first million? Or how can you be patient on your way to whatever you think is the outcome? And I'm like, because we didn't come for the outcome. We didn't come for a pile of things. We came for our own well-being. And so it's like moment by moment, how we can continue to like expand our experience of this moment. It's a myth that there's something in the future that feels better than what's available here.
And your whole life is happening if you're, having zero presence on your way to the finish line. I remember writing, I hope I don't butcher my own words, but in Remember Love, I wrote something that said, when the material is at the center of my goals, I find that when I get to the finish line, there's some loneliness there. But when the personal is at the center of my goals, when I get to the finish line, whether I win or I lose, I'm the one that's held. And it doesn't matter basically that I'm not holding the gold medal, because I get to be held wherever I land. And I think that is
Beautiful.
also critical in that, in that when the personal is at the center of your goals, waking up and feeling good, waking up and feeling secure, even when you personalize, put the personal at the center of a financial goal, how it's about how you feel. I just want to, if that and how you get to feel with your family. And the what I have found is, if like stuff is at the center of the financial goal, then you will never reach the financial goal and you'll keep pushing your finish line. But when the ease of I just want to not work on Sundays, because on Sundays, I really get to be with the people I love, whether it's going out to a really fun lunch with my girlfriends and not having to have anxiety to start the week, or whether it's being with my children or being with my partner or being able to visit my elder parent, whatever it could be. That I think allows for there to be enoughness in that financial goal.
Yeah, it's so true. It's like, I think there's a way in which the mind makes it that there's something outside of us that contains our well-being. It's either this person's validation or this many followers or whatever this financial goal is. And all we really want to do is arrive at our own door and be able to sit beside ourselves and drink in whatever the experience is with some equanimity, whether it's something that's hard that we need to name or something that's beautiful. It's like, just that's the most satisfying thing, is just being with what is in the most beautiful way, moment by moment. And every day we are presented with that opportunity. And your work and your books are such a bridge to those places within us. I want to say thank you for being that. And this new book is coming out very soon. It's about less than a month away. What do you want people, because you've already created so many different beautiful books, and in this creation, what were you hoping that people would walk away with? What were you hoping that this would do to serve people?
Well, when I So right before the pandemic, so I'm pregnant in 2019 and with my first daughter, and I'm coming off of a year of being pretty burnt out from touring my other books. And then I kind of I commit to my next two books, all of which were coming out in 2019 and 2020. And, or I had one coming out in 2019, and I had two more for the end of 2019, 20, and 2020. And
That's a lot.
it was a lot. And then I found out I was pregnant probably a week and a half after that, signing that commitment, all while I'd been on the road in the years before that for, 260 days out of the year. And so in the beginning of that year, I was really burnt out in January. I remember being like, I am burnt out. And what I'll also say is that this was the height of kind of the girl boss culture. Okay. And it's funny because someone I work with sent me something yesterday that said it was a tweet. It said like a burnout love story, and it was someone saying I I let go of girl boss and and turned it into I'm just a girl, and I finally found rest basically. And so we're looking at that period of time. It's also the election. It was a really intense time. I'm pregnant and I'm living between New York, where I lived for 13 years. I knew I was having my baby in LA because Simon, my partner, has two kids from a previous marriage. So I wanted everyone to be together. And Simon is working on a film in London. And so throughout the entire pregnancy, I'm kind of touring. I remember I even had to, not for tour, but for another work project, I had to go to Africa twice. I'm kind of
Oh my
going
God, the
across
amount of things on
from
your plate.
it was bizarre looking back on it now. And so by the time I get towards the finish line of, this of my pregnancy with Memphis, I am so burnt out because I'd never really healed. As you know how burnout works, it's like if you don't really heal it, you can kind of bring your kind of 20 to a 60. But if you don't actually try to get back into the 90s or into 100, your nervous system is just so easily shot,
Yeah, it's
right?
like lack of sleep. If you just keep getting no sleep, no sleep, no sleep, it's
Yes.
just you don't replenish
And then,
it.
yeah, and you could go to try to be like, I got 5 hours instead of two, but
No,
it just doesn't. So I remember at that time, and I churn out the books, and I tour pregnant also. So I do a tour of one of the books that came out in America, and I tour 7 months pregnant, as when I'm 7 months pregnant. And I remember after that experience, and I have Memphis, I was like, I I sit down with my agent, and I'm kind of like, I don't ever want to be committed to something that's not like fully baked, or I don't know exactly what the next book is. And because I kind of, as you know how books go, you have like a concept, and you still a concept, and you're at a treatment. and
100%.
and so I was like, I need to know, like I need to know at least the exact feeling I am speaking to in my readers. Like I need to know what the next one is. I cannot sign another book, and I need to have been writing it. I needed to have been brewing in it. And honestly, I'm so burdened out. I don't even know if I have another book in me. I don't know if I should just be focusing on other projects. And I had also gotten kind of caught in the girl boss of it all, and was kind of running a company I'd somehow created that I didn't even really want. And I had like so many projects and so many things I was making. And I was like, I have lost the space where, and I'll never forget this because my friend Sade said it to me. She said, she was like, since I met you, she's one of my first friends I ever met in New York. And she was like, and I wrote about this a little bit in Remember Love. She said, you are someone who really thrives and has joy in building homes. She's like, you're a home for all of your friends. You're a home for
What a
you.
beautiful thing
You're
to
like,
say.
I, and she said, you love a homey feel. Like you want everything to feel cozy and homey. And she's like, and you built a home for your readers. It feels like they are welcomed home to something. She was like, and I feel that you have somehow maybe had gotten hijacked by the culture that told you had to build an empire, and an empire is the opposite of a home. She was like, it's not cozy and it has to move quickly, and everyone can't get your individual attention. And like, you can't sit there and look everybody in the eyes every day. And I was like, you're so right. And you do have to realize that, because by the way, there are empire builders, and they actually have a superpower that is incredible, because they can go really deep and they can go really wide, and everyone feels seen, and it doesn't take anything out of them. But you do have to know when you're a person who builds homes, because you do have to, I think, build in more intimate spaces. So I kind of drop everything when I get pregnant with Bayou, because I got pregnant pretty quickly after Memphis. And I was like, I still don't know. I still don't know. And the pandemic's going on during this time. And I was like, I just know that I can't, my next step forward has to feel deliberate. And through this time, I'm going through postpartum stuff, and it was a really kind of challenging and contemplative time for me, because I really was having my own kind of the deepest inward inquiry I'd had in a long time, while also being on the phone with all of my friends. Like, I'm sure you had friends who were all getting divorced and separated, or leaning in on this thing, or, whether it was alcohol or getting sober, or, I mean, that people went through major transformative changes over that period.
Yeah.
And I started to feel like I had something to say, because for one of the first times in my writing, I was like, I want to kind of share with my readers how I felt when I was stumbling around in the dark, found a light that I had somehow lit within, and I want to create a trail to that light for other people. And so while Heart Talk and some of my other books are what I would say are like these like ideas and really outward, as people would say it, as advice or poems, and I love those so much. But remember, love is the thing that um, it's a very patient book, and it's very and while it still has that kind of lightness and ease for my readers, because I feel like that's really important in the times we're living in, because we're so stressed and overstimulated. I don't ever want someone to open my book and feel overwhelmed by the book. This book is really like, it's kind of going around into a tough time with a flashlight and saying, this is how we find okayness, or how I did. And I share so many stories about, like the ones I just shared, and other things my friends and I discussed, or kind of how we coped and got through, not only these past few years, but there's one part of the book where I just write about heartbreak for the entirety of part 3, because I felt like I'd never spent real time to say, how did I get through those heartbreaks? What words would have helped me the most? What was the advice my friends gave me that did really help me recalibrate, to kind of being really fixated or obsessed with something or some outcome, and allow me to recenter myself in my own life. And so it's a really special book to me, because it's, while Hard Talk is so personal, this book is, has so many more stories from my life in it, that it really feels like my whole personhood's on the page. Whereas I'd feel that in Hard Talk, my personality and my sense of self and the love I have for my readers is really on the page. And that's what I think people love. This one's very scary, because you feel like it really is me.
Well, that was so beautiful. I love how you said you like found this light inside yourself, and then like wanted to create your trail back to that light. And I love what you say about okayness. What does that mean to you, for people to find okayness?
I just said to a friend this morning, that I mentioned earlier, who is struggling with something, and I said to her, it's I I mean, I first said, call me if you need a listener. And in the meantime, just remember that the saying this is really, really hard and I'm so sad, and not being okay is oddly the first step into finding okayness. Is that really honest moment of saying this is the worst thing ever. And because when we can begin with honesty, we can, that immediately brings integrity to the experience and
Yeah.
allows us to heal with integrity, which is what we really need, right? Like we
Yeah.
need that to find the tools. And strong people want to be strong in a tough situation. And I think that allowing ourselves to not be who we have to be when things go wrong, um, I think allows for us to find this pathway to fundamental okayness, which is this really hard thing is happening, but I do know that I can move through it. And I do know that my life has taught me that I can handle this. Um, and I don't have to handle it alone. And I think that's where we kind of shed, our superpowers during those moments. And I think that okayness is who you are no matter what's going on, where you don't have to lean on anything that has to present to others with a mask, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have to sit here and be like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. I can say I'm not fine and it's really hard and I hate that I'm going through this.
Yeah.
Um and in that I have faith that, you know, like it rains and 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 then there's a beautiful sunset at some point and the world is beautiful again. And I believe that beauty comes again. And so I think the knowing that that is the nature of who and how we are and function, um, and that resilience is real.
It's so good. It's like it's just a really beautiful reminder to be a witness to yourself. It's a really beautiful reminder to name what's here and begin there. And then I love what you said, like beauty comes again. And we know that too. But some of that beauty is in being a really gentle, good friend to yourself and being able to say, there's nothing to make right about this right now. There's no cheering up that will be warranted. It's just a matter of making a space to see what it is and hold what it is and be a witness, and I love how you said to your friend, let me know if you need a listener. As much as I know people listen to people, I've never heard anyone say that. And I think that's really so gorgeous and generous that rolls off your tongue. I also just want to name your own journey and your own self-discovery and how much I love this whole conversation around building homes versus building empires. And I think that I was just talking about it to my community yesterday, that it's very easily a distraction because other people will tell you that there's no end to what you can scale. And there's this feeling that more is always more. And you turn around and you say, hang on a minute, my appetite and my authentic expression is actually here. I really don't want a team of 40 people. And I really don't actually enjoy the reality of what a life looks like when I'm making $100 million a year. I really want this. I really want to create this. I love the word cozy. I love the word home. I love the word, gathering, and that has intimacy built into it. And I'm feeling that in myself. And I was just sharing with you before we hit record officially that we moved away from Mandeville Canyon, which felt so much like home to me and so much like quiet, nestling, gathering, just that feeling of intimacy. And we moved to a house that's, 10,000 square feet overlooking Mulholland. And it's really, really beautiful. And I cried so hard when we got here. And I realized that I was Alice in Wonderland and I had gone down the path to to the tea party and I really wanted to go to the other path. And I think that that's a really available uh, danger. I think that we live in a time that's always pointing you towards more and pointing you over here. And there might not be well-being at the top of that summit just because somebody keeps pointing you higher and further and more. And we live in a, like you said, girl boss, like go, go, go. Like, I don't know that that's for everyone in your most expressed self. I think that you have to know the difference between where you're holding yourself back and then also where you're pushing yourself to a place that in no universe do you feel like you fit. And so I'm dancing there. And I think that there's not a lot of modeling for what it looks like to be living in a place that feels like flow and get in your gift, and also really being deliberate about what actually feels like it's serving you. And I think that it's awesome that you stopped and paused and took a deep breath and then sat with that breath for a moment and said, what's really me, and where do I really want to go, and how do I want to do this?
And the word that I would kind of throw into what you just said is freedom. Where do we feel free? Where do our decisions orient towards freedom? And I think that there in our culture, this idea of no sleep, hustle and grind, that there's not a lot of freedom to be found there. And I think it's really important that we orient towards this idea that we are free to do and go where we feel warmth and love. And so I think, and I think that you can't have okayness without freedom. And I think that this kind of the freedom to cry, the freedom to, take the days away to heal, the freedom to, I think that, even as the friend I was telling you about is someone I also work with in ways. And, she was like, so I'm just going to be off the grid for a few days. The freedom to do that instead of being so obsessed with your hustle and grind that you cannot heal from this hard thing you're going through. And so I think that, always keeping freedom in the equation is how we make these incredible decisions for ourselves as far as how we are scaling. Like if scaling gives more freedom, great. If it gives less, I do think it's something to think about, because ultimately you need space, and freedom creates space, and you need space to connect with others. And the connection with others are always going to be the things that make you feel that life is worthwhile.
I love it. And I love just really pausing on that and offering that as an invitation for people to pause and to take a look at, like, where are you consciously co-creating freedom and where are you not? And don't get distracted and build a 747 when really all you want is to just put your feet in the sand where you already are, And so I think that that's a really important journey to just constantly just check in, and by golly, there's very few things in your scroll that are going to remind you of that. So you have to find the things that do. And like you said, then walk your way back to that light within, which is what your work does. And that's why it's such a medicinal gift that you give us. And the reason you're giving it to us is because you're brave enough to give it to yourself. And I love that you exist.
Oh my God. Thank you so much.
In this book, that just the words, there's so much poetry in this book, and there's so much, like you said, there's letting go, there's surrender, there's heartbreak, there's beauty, but these words, remember love, just what does that mean to you to make remembering love and remembering to remember what love feels like a part of our day? Like, what does that mean that we could remember that and that we could hang out there more often than we do?
So I opened this book with a story about being at the height of postpartum depression with my first kid, I think. And I I'm in the bathtub, and the bathtub is my podcast place, like many people. And I'm listening to Tara Brach, and who we all love. And I've listened to her for, I think, at least 10 years. I've always loved her. I, I love her. But as the haze of, the brain fog that comes with postpartum depression and any type of depression, I'm kind of listening. I'm kind of not. I'm in a daze. I'm trying to do that thing where you're like, I'm going to do the right thing for myself, right? Because when you don't feel like yourself, you like I kind of write in the book, it's I thought I knew how to love myself, but I didn't know how to love myself when I didn't feel like myself. And that was my big aha that I write towards. In part one of this book, which is called Eventually We Get There, it's all about coming home to yourself and that lost and kind of, finding yourself in lostness, and reorienting. And so I'm in the tub and I'm kind of like, okay, I don't feel like myself. I need to do things that are like myself. I love the bathtub. And anyone who knows me, they know if I'm having a bad day, they'll tell me to go into the bathtub. Okay. So I get in and I put on Tara, and I can't really focus, but I just all of a sudden hear the words, remember love. She says them. And it felt like somebody snatched me from the fog and just put me not in the light, but out of the fog. Like they had given me a bubble of kind of clarity or clearness where I could see what I was going through in myself, and really witness myself very clearly. And listen, I write because I believe in the power of words. Were my therapy before I could afford therapy. So I believe that words are that powerful. I feel that. I know that. I have felt that. That's very true for me. And so while of course, the words "remember love" did not heal my depression, but they did act as an anchor, to a new toolkit to help me manage this. And so when I didn't realize that I was beating up on myself all day for being like, you're moving so slow. Why can't you function? Why can't you think? Why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And I didn't realize that I was like almost giving myself tough love. And I don't even think I believe in the phrase tough love, but I was not being gentle with myself. And so I had this kind of mantra that was like, remember love. Like, the pace you're moving is the pace that you're moving in is the pace you're moving in. Like, just, you're so be grateful you get to move at whatever pace you're in right now. And remember love kind of always attached and reattached me like an anchor to gratitude in some type of movement out of this stuckness. And I knew then that, I'd taken a Post-it and I had written, please remember love. And I put it at the top of a board. And for the next, it was Memphis. So for my first kid. So for the next basically 3 years, I wrote, and everything had to go back to remember love. Everything had to go back to this anchor of these words that gave me such profound healing. And so from that, I built out a book, and I built out part one is called Eventually We Get There. Part two is called Worthy Rebellions. Part three is Notes on Heartbreak. Part four is And Then We Let Go. And all of this helps us to remember love in many different facets, how we treat ourselves, how we treat another, how we treat the world around us, how we allow others to treat us. The simple request we can make to someone in our lives who may be treating us with toxic energy, to ask them to remember love. And so for me, the title is so personal, not because I was the genius who thought of it, but because I didn't, I heard Tara Brach say those words, but they'd so profoundly impacted me, and shifted the entire way I chose to heal. And when I asked myself, what it meant to love myself when I felt my worst or my most anxious, I realized I needed totally different tools than I needed when I felt that I was in a really great kind of space and flow. And so that's the title of the book.
It's so beautiful. It's an amazing insight into how that came to be. When she said that to you that day or any day, but the days that you remember, like waking up to those words, remember love, what did you think she meant? What does that mean to remember love?
I think it means in how we treat ourselves or another. Um, are we allowing the junk to talk, the lowest energy to talk, or are we gifting ourselves our most divine sense of self, power, magic? And so I think for me, how I interpret that is, can I cut through? Remember love is to cut through the junk that stands between you and love. Um, and so it's like that Rumi poem of, our job is not to seek to find love, but to remove the blocks between us and love. And so I think it's to live in, strategize, and interpret the world without the blocks and without the junk.
Yeah. I just was on a 6-day meditation retreat in Vail. And whenever I go on a retreat like that, all I can know that I remember that I know is that all that's here is just this infinite field of love. And it's so magical, and it's so Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, and everything, every tree, every person is emanating from this vibration. And you can feel this way in which everything else is just an illusion. And it's so important to remember that, because it reorients you to life as it actually is.
And it connects you to, I think, anytime you can interpret and feel that your life, in life, you are a part of something big. That is the belonging that so many of us are searching for. And I think to have that at our base is also part of okayness.
Yeah. Which, I mean, what probably most fundamentally changed my life was I took a trip to Jerusalem when I was 21, and I stayed for a few years. And my beautiful, holy rabbi said to me, "You're a masterpiece, a piece of the master." And that we all are a piece of this infinite field, which is just the most loving, creative force. That's all it is. And we're all part of it. And you're right. That is like the intrinsic belonging. That is what gives us like all of our well-being. It's all from that place. It's so cool that you share these thoughts, and that you so deeply can excavate your own process and understanding. And then you have such a gorgeous gifting of how to put words together in a collection that feel like a sentence that unlocks us, the way that you put a sentence together. So it's so awesome. Tell everybody where they can buy the book on pre-order, and where they can follow you and be a part of it.
You can buy Remember Love wherever you buy books. Of course, we really love when you buy from your independent booksellers. Who are we without those havens in life to
Is there an independent bookseller that you like that we can put a link to in the show notes for their store?
Yes, we can. I mean, we can obviously link to the bookstore that kind of is the collection of all of them. I love, if you're in LA, Reparations Club is a local Black owned bookstore. And I can send links to all of my favorite bookstores. And
I like helping the indie bookstores. It's really, because I love walking in to a
the
bookstore.
smell.
It's
the community.
smell, and then it's just like walking around and like picking things up and like reading 4 really beautiful words, and then finding the it's just, who doesn't want there to be bookstores? Like, we want
And also,
everywhere.
who doesn't have a secret dream to have a bookstore? I think that you like watch You've Got
100%.
Mail, and you just decide that you want to be Meg
corner.
Ryan.
Yeah.
And so I think that
do.
we all have that inner Meg Ryan dream of the shop around the corner. And so I love them, but they're I think bookstores are like parks, and beautiful
Agreed.
statues and public art. I think that they make a community, habitable for those
Agreed.
around. So
My
please support
husband,
those.
my husband's dad passed away in 1987. So when he was just a kid, but his dad owned a bookstore. And so
Wow.
he used to work in the bookstore and like he'd bring home Encyclopedia Brown or whatever books he was reading then. But I remember that was like definitely a reason why I liked him more. I was like, your dad owned a bookstore and you grew up in a bookstore. It's so cool.
So cool. So yeah, it's hot. It's really hot.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you so
all of
much.
this confetti hearts and
Oh
love.
my
I feel like it was
gosh.
like a bath bomb. You said bath a few times and
Yeah.
the words are so loving. And I feel like I was like soaked in just the most delightful energy.
Oh
Thank you
my
for bringing
God.
it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on. And thank you everyone for listening.